Maybe I did it in Wednesday night.
Really?
Yeah, just show it.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, because the different person. 紐と寝がしい。
Hello. So, welcome to this TED Dialogues, the first of a series that's really we've done in response to the current political upheaval. I don't know about you, I've become quite concerned about the growing divisiveness in this country and in the world. No one's listening to each other, right? They aren't. I mean, it feels like we need a different kind of conversation, one that's based on, I don't know, on reason, listening, on understanding, on a broader context. That's at least what we're going to try in these TED Dialogues starting today. And we couldn't have anyone with us who I'd be more excited to kick this off. This is a mind right.
This is actually, I like this opening because it's really what seems to be happening, right? If you look at the way that politics is being done, especially by Trump, it's not about dialogue at all. Every opponent of Trump is very much addressed personally, winning or losing, short-term politics, and really playing on the person, not really trying to win the argument, but just saying, oh, he's crooked, or this person has a vested interest, or he's not playing fair, or this and that and the other. It's not really about coming with persuasive arguments, but just trying to discredit the other person. It's not about having a dialogue about the content, but about the credibility of the person, what the discussion is about. So it's not about exchanging opinions and being heard, etc. anymore. The dialogue today is very much about winning and losing, and I cannot believe you, and I'm better than you and stronger than you, so you better do what I tell you, otherwise that's it, I'm not going to listen to you anyway.
So what he's talking about?
So he's pointing this out as the sign of the times, and I agree with him that this is actually a sign of our times, that we have gone away from discussing things quietly and considerately, but in the political arena, in the political sphere nowadays, it's less about the contents of your argument and more about winning and losing and just calling each other names and not really listening and just driving your own agenda.
What do you want to say? I don't understand what you mean.
What I want to say is that I agree that this is one of the important trends, developments in our world today.
So you mean no discussion?
No discussion. No discussion on contents, and this taps into the way that a lot of populists are engaging in politics.
They don't discuss the content?
They don't discuss the contents.
Only they speak out the issues?
They speak out their issues, and they say the other side is stupid, and they're trying to deceive you, and they cannot be trusted, and
they don't get into detail.
They don't get into detail. They don't discuss the real issue.
It's interesting. Yes, I understand. That's right.
Right. You know what? Actually, I was listening to a podcast. The climate in the United States, every 2 years, there's a climate report, and it goes across all the different departments in government. It's the biggest climate publication that is being published, and it's the world all over. People are looking for this publication because it is so comprehensive. There's so much data collected. So this year, the report came out, and actually in the report they concluded that if they would not take drastic measures, then starting from 2050 we would see a shrinkage of our GDP. By the end of the decade, it could lead to a reduction of our GDP by 10%.
I know.
You know this, but a lot of people don't know this. And actually, in response, under pressure of politics, now they have decided that they will no longer publish data beyond 2040 to basically obscure the reality that, based on the projections derived on in a scientific manner, from 2050 and onwards, we will see a significant cost in our economy if we don't turn around. This kind of just not discussing the realities, but just saying, "Oh, I don't believe it." I mean, this is what Trump literally says. "Oh, this report has been shown. What do you think?" "I don't believe it." That's it. That's all that he said about it. "I don't believe it."
Yeah, he's saying
That's terrible. That is really. Oh, I feel that's
me
really
too.
terrible.
I don't believe it.
You don't believe
Because this is because background we had in the past 20 years, 2 decades.
Hmm.
They're talking too much emphasizing in the past. So gradually many people don't believe this report.
But I mean, what I mean, they don't. But based on what? It's just emotional.
PICC or something kind of name of it, right? PICC or PCICC.
I don't know actually.
Too much exaggerated.
I don't know, but basically, we should discuss it on its merits.
Especially CO2 will cause temperature going rising. But many people don't believe it. CO2?
Right.
How come CO2?
Yeah, but how well are you educated to make a judgment whether or not this is true?
Oh, devastating is true. Okay, climate change causes a problem true, but
Right.
CO2 is not true.
Why? Because you have
I
you studied
know
it?
that. I studied 15 years. As the largest one of environmental organization, I joined a member. 15 years I studied many times, so I know that. You know, they couldn't prove CO2 and raising temperature.
But could they prove that it was not true?
No, this is.
Can we afford to be wrong about this?
This is CO2 is very difficult to get how dense it is in the
Right, and it's
atmosphere.
actually it's a global problem, but it's also a local problem because some areas are more affected than other areas. So, for example, Australia is very heavily affected.
Oh,
and
no,
other-
simply cannot measure.
CO2 concentration we can measure.
No, cannot measure.
CO2?
In the all atmospheres, and how we're going to measure CO2 increase or decrease? No, we can't measure.
But that's not true.
No,
also. We
this
can measure that.
No. But 0.0000 some percent. So very difficult to fluctuate and how to measure. You can get, but very difficult to this is how impact
We
for the.
know quite well what the CO2
Yeah, I know that
concentration
very
is.
well. Yeah, I know. Any philosopher, any scholar prove that.
Well,
But Trump saying is I don't think he's true, but climate change is happening. But many people relating to CO2, that is wrong, in my opinion. Is. But I understand climate change is cause lots of disastrous situation happening, right?
and I mean, whether you believe it or not, that's not the point. You cannot just reject and just put the whole.
No. I accept that climate change is happening, and temperature is increasing, and cause lots of disaster, and drought and everything happening. But this is not directly relating to CO2.
And by not discussing the report, and by not discussing the fact that based on this report, it is estimated that our economy will shrink 10%.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. But okay.
But he's not. He's talking about it.
But must be careful about this. Is all everything is related to CO2. They are talking about that. This is wrong. But
Yeah.
climate change is happening. But we need to consider what the true reason is going on. Right?
Right.
So this is the issue.
Okay. So the point is indeed. So we need to listen to what people have to say, especially if they have taken a scientific approach. I mean, we can disagree with their conclusions, but only based on the
But
context.
this is true that we need to control for the fossil usage, right?
Right.
This is true. But
Right.
we need to seriously
But
consider that. We
anyway.
try to get the fact.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I think that is the point. We need to look at the facts, and then we can decide whether or not we support its conclusions.
Currently, not enough.
But to just say, okay, we don't like the conclusions, therefore we're going to hide the facts. That's
No,
a very
fact is fact.
well, but that's what's happening. Eh?
But reasoning and fact and just result and circumstances, we should prove the reason why. Currently, we cannot get result yet.
Right. Okay. So basically.
Okay, some people, scholars agree that.
Yeah.
Majority
Not all
people
of them.
are skeptical, but some people are against it. This is the current situation. Okay, now move on.
Right. Okay. I think basically my main point here is that it's a very dangerous development that we are saying we don't like the conclusions, therefore we're going to hide the research. I would like to live in a world where at least we look at the results and then we draw our conclusions, not just hide the facts because we don't like the conclusion that we can draw based upon them. So, okay, that's...
Yeah, that thinks pretty much like no one else on the planet, I would hasten to say. I'm serious. I'm serious. He synthesizes history with underlying ideas in a way that kind of takes your breath away. So some of you will know this book, Sapiens. Has anyone here read Sapiens? I mean, I could not put it down. The way that he tells the story of mankind through big ideas that really make you think differently about the world. It's kind of amazing. And here's the follow-up, which I think is being published in the US next week.
Yeah, next week.
Homo Deus. Now this is the history of the next 100 years. I've had a chance to read it. It's extremely dramatic, and I dare say for some people quite alarming. It's a must-read, and honestly, we couldn't have someone better to help make sense of what on earth is happening in the world right now. So a warm welcome, please, to Yuval Noah Harari.
This is a good video.
You saw it?
It's great to be joined by our friends on Facebook and around the web. Hello, Facebook. And all of you, as I start asking questions of Yuval, come up with your own questions. Not necessarily about the political scandal du jour, but about the broader understanding of where are we heading. You ready? Okay, we're going to go. So here we are. Yuval, New York City, 2017. There's a new president in power and shockwaves rippling around the world. What on earth is happening?
I think the basic thing that happens is that we have lost our story. Humans think in stories, and we try to make sense of the world by telling stories. And for the last few decades, we had a very simple and very attractive story about what's happening in the world. And the story said that, oh, what's happening is that the economy is being globalized, politics is being liberalized, and the combination of the two will create paradise on earth. And we just need to keep on globalizing the economy and liberalizing the political system, and everything will be wonderful. And 2016 is the moment when a very large segment, even of the Western world, stopped believing in this story. For good or bad reason, doesn't matter. People stopped believing in the story. And when you don't have a story, you don't understand what's happening.
I mean, part of you believes that that story was actually a very effective story.
So story basically is a metaphor, but and actually it's the reality. Like, for example, the story of the United States, the American dream, is a story.
Yeah, he is talking about globalization.
Right, but also national identity.
But actually, no. He's okay. Everybody believes that
Right,
globalization
that
and liberalization, but actually, what different stories are happening. This is nationalization. He want to say
for a lot of people who they don't believe that story anymore because they see that they lose their jobs. They see that they are not part of that story. Their story is different from the story that they've been told. The story they have been told. So they give up. They stop believing that story.
He want to speak a different story.
I believe that
different story.
A lot of people believe that
nationalism. America great again. This is what he wanted to say.
Well, actually, nationalism is in response to the fact that the story of globalization turns out to be false for many people. That's why nationalism occurs. So it's not the story of nationalism, but more or less nationalism is the response to the failing of the story of globalization.
They believe the story is supported with globalization and liberalization, but actually that story was different.
So yeah, exactly, because the globalization didn't bring the benefits that they thought it would bring. That globalization, market liberalization would bring.
But he wanted to say it's different, not nationalism.
No, he doesn't talk about nationalism yet. He talks about the story of globalization and how much benefits it would bring to everyone, that we all would get rich and affluent, but it didn't turn out that way, because actually there are a lot of people who do not benefit from globalization, and they stop believing in that story, that general narrative that we should all globalize and open up our markets to become to join the global wealth that will come out of it.
Well, to some extent, yes. I mean, according to some measurements, we are now in the best time ever for humankind. Today, for the first time in history, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little, which is an amazing achievement. Also, for the first time in history, more people die from old age than from infectious diseases. And violence is also down. For the first time in history, more people commit suicide than are killed by crime and terrorism and war put together. Statistically, you are your own worst enemy. At least from all the people in the world, you're most likely to be killed by yourself. Which is, again, very good news compared to the level of violence that we saw in previous eras.
But this process of connecting the world ended up with a large group of people kind of feeling left out. And they've reacted, and so we have this bombshell that's sort of rippling through the whole system. I mean, how do you make of what's happened? It feels like the old way that people thought of politics, the left-right divide, has been blown up and replaced. How should we think of this?
Yeah, the old 20th century political model of left versus right is now largely irrelevant. And the real divide today is between global and national, or global or local. And you see it, again, all over the world, that this is now the main struggle. We probably need...
So left-right actually comes from the old capitalist socialist divide, where basically you were a worker, you were a capitalist, and that determined how you wanted to go. That's how you stood in life. But now the divide has become global versus national. So there's a tilting away from left and right. Right being capitalist, left being socialist, and that has been turning into nationalist versus globalist.
So different.
It's a different playing field. The political parties have not catered to this. Why do we see parties coming up like the Brexit Party? Because it has a completely different agenda. It doesn't play in the left or right movement. It plays on the issue of, we want to be local, we want to be national, and not not global, not European anymore.
Completely new political models and completely new ways of thinking about politics. In essence, what you can say is that we now have global ecology, we have a global economy, but we have national politics, and this doesn't work together. This makes the political system ineffective because it has no control over the forces that shape our life. And you have basically two solutions to this imbalance: either deglobalize the economy and turn it back into a national economy, or globalize the political system.
Basically, our environment, our ecology is a global system. Now we are going to nationalism in terms of our political system. These things do not match. So we need to synchronize that in some way.
I guess many liberals out there view Trump and his government as kind of irredeemably bad, just awful in every way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any underlying narrative or political philosophy in there that is at least worth understanding? How would you articulate that philosophy? Is it just the philosophy of nationalism?
I think the underlying feeling or idea is that the political system, something is broken there. It doesn't empower the ordinary person anymore. It doesn't care so much about the ordinary person anymore. And I think this diagnosis of the political disease is correct. With regard to the answers, I'm far less certain. I think what we are seeing is the immediate human reaction. If something doesn't work, let's go back. And you see it all over the world that people, almost nobody in the political system today has any future-oriented vision of where humankind is going. Almost everywhere you see retrograde vision. Let's make America great again. Like it was great, I don't know, in the 50s, in the 80s, sometime, let's go back there. And you go to Russia, so 100 years after Lenin, Putin's vision for the future is basically, let's go back to the Tsarist empire. And in Israel, where I come from, the hottest political vision of the present is let's build the temple again. So let's go back 2,000 years backwards. So people are thinking, sometime in the past, we've lost it, and sometimes in the past, like you lost your way in the city, and you say, okay, let's go back to the point where I felt secure and start again. And I don't think this can work, but a lot of people, this is their gut instinct.
But why couldn't it work? I mean, America First is a very appealing slogan in many ways. Patriotism is in many ways a very noble thing. It's played a role in promoting cooperation among large numbers of people. Why couldn't you have a world organized in countries, all of which put themselves first?
For many centuries, even thousands of years, patriotism worked quite well. Of course, it led to wars and so forth, but we shouldn't focus too much on the bad. There are also many, many positive things about patriotism and the ability to have a large number of people care about each other, sympathize with one another, and come together for collective action. If you go back to the First Nations, so thousands of years ago, the people who lived along the Yellow River in China, it was many, many different tribes. And they all dependent on the river for survival and for prosperity, but all of them also suffered from periodical floods and periodical droughts. And no tribe could really do anything about it because each of them controlled just a tiny section of the river. And then in a long and complicated process, the tribes coalesced together to form the Chinese nation, which controlled the entire Yellow River and had the ability to bring hundreds of thousands of people together to build dams and canals and regulate the river and prevent the worst floods and droughts and raise the level of prosperity for everybody. And this worked in many places around the world. But in the 21st century, technology is changing all that in a fundamental way. We are now living, all people in the world are living alongside the same cyber river. And no single nation can regulate this river by itself. We are all living together in a single planet, which is threatened by our own actions. And if you don't have some kind of global cooperation, nationalism just is not on the right level to tackle the problems of whether it's climate change or whether it's technological disruption.
So it was a beautiful idea, and
this is his idea. This is his basic concept, what he's thinking about.
So patriotism leads to war, sure. It can lead to war, but it also helps people to look after each other, cooperate, control something that they're all affected by, like the example of the Yellow River and why China basically came into existence by this shared interest and the fact that they were all negatively affected by the Yellow River. They could their patriotism, they could bring the river under control by collaboration. That's why you need a nation. But today the rivers are not the rivers anymore. It's like the internet and the global infrastructure. And that's not a national issue anymore. That requires a global approach.
In a world where most of the action, most of the issues took place on national scale, but your argument is that the issues that matter most today no longer take place on a national scale, but on a global scale.
Exactly. All the major problems of the world today are global in essence, and they cannot be solved unless through some kind of global cooperation. It's not just climate change, which is like the most obvious example people give. I think more in terms of technological disruption. If you think about, for example, artificial intelligence, over the next 20, 30 years, pushing hundreds of millions of people out of the job market, this is a problem on a global level. It will disrupt the economy of all the countries. And similarly, if you think about, say, bioengineering and people being afraid of conducting, I don't know, genetic engineering research on humans, it won't help if just a single country let's say the US, outlaws all genetic experiments on humans. But China and North Korea continues to do it. So the US cannot solve it by itself. And very quickly, the pressure on the US to do the same will be immense because we are talking about high risk, high gain technologies. If somebody else is doing it, I can't allow myself to remain behind. The only way to have regulations, effective regulations on things like genetic engineering is to have global regulations. If you just have national regulations, nobody would like to stay behind.
So this is really interesting. So it seems to me this may be one key to provoking at least a constructive conversation between the different sides here, because I think everyone can agree that the start point of a lot of the anger that's propelled us to where we are is because of the legitimate concerns about job loss. Work has gone, a traditional way of life has gone, and it's no wonder that people are furious about that. And in general, they have blamed sort of globalism, global elites for doing this to them without asking their permission, and that seems like a legitimate complaint. But what I hear you saying is that so a key question is, what is the real cause of job loss, both now and going forward? To the extent that it's about globalism, then the right response, yes, is to shut down borders and keep people out and change trade agreements and so forth. But you're saying, I think, that actually the bigger cause of job loss is not going to be that at all. It's going to originate in technological questions, and we have no chance of solving that unless we operate as a connected world.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know about the present, but looking to the future, it's not the Mexicans or Chinese who will take the jobs from the people in Pennsylvania. It's the robots and algorithms. So unless you plan to build a big wall on the border of California, the wall on the border with Mexico is going to be very ineffective. And I was struck when I watched the debates before the elections. I was struck that certainly Trump did not even attempt to frighten people by saying the robots will take your jobs. Now, even if it's not true, it doesn't matter. It could have extremely effective way of frightening people and galvanizing people. The robots will take your jobs, and nobody used that line. And it made me afraid, because it meant that no matter what happens in universities and laboratories, and there is already an intense debate about it, but in the mainstream political system and among the general public, people are just unaware that there could be an immense technological disruption, not in 200 years, but in 10, 20, 30 years. And we have to do something about it now, partly because most of what we teach children today in school or in college is going to be completely irrelevant to the job market of 2040, 2050. So it's not something we'll need to think about in 2040. We need to think today what to teach the young people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So
most of our problems, internet infrastructure, technological developments, and other things are global of nature. So this reactionary movement that we need to go back and close our borders and make sure that the other side plays fairer doesn't address the real issues. It's not about import duties from China or from Mexico or whatever. It's about the bigger issue about technological development and what we can do there. And that's the issue that's being ignored. The whole discussion is focusing on labor wage differences and differences in labor conditions and labor laws. But that is not going to be relevant anymore 20, 30 years from now, because then we will see a completely different development where basically technology has caught up with people, and they will actually have a much bigger impact on the labor market than our open borders and our difference in labor laws and wages. Shall I get a cup of coffee for you guys?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Yeah.
Okay, take a break.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Coffee.
A coffee.
Something else?
Nothing.
Okay. Oh, tired. Oh. Stop recording. Oh.